You're about to listen to a new episode of Audio Signals. Get ready to take a journey into the known, the unknown, and everything in between. Recorded at no specific point in time nor space, ITSP Magazine's co-founders Marco Ciappelli and Sean Martin follow their passion and curiosity as they venture away from the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society to discover new stories worth being told. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Nintex is the global standard for business process management and automation. The Nintex platform helps their clients accelerate progress on their digital transformation journeys by quickly and easily managing, automating, and optimizing business processes. Learn more at nintex.com.
Blue Lava is the first business platform for CISOs to manage their security program. Blue Lava guides security leaders to effectively measure, optimize, and communicate their security program with confidence and ease in one platform. Learn more at bluelava.net.
All right, and here we are. This is Sean Martin, and you're very welcome to a new episode of Audio Signals here on ITSP Magazine. I'm flying solo today. Marco's off, and I get the pleasure to have our guest all to myself, an amazing person we've had a chance to chat with before, and I'm thrilled to have her on the show again. Juliette Kayyem, thanks so much for being on.
Oh, I'm absolutely thrilled. Thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah, we talked directly cybersecurity before, and I mean, you've done so much. You're a CEO, a co-founder, you're an analyst on CNN, a lecturer at Harvard Kennedy School, and you're also an author. I think 6 books under the belt, shall we say, at this point. That's a phenomenal number. First off, congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, in between government stints, I've been on the faculty at the Kennedy School, which is a great place to be. So thank you.
And so maybe let's just start with this first. Well, for those who haven't met you, virtually or otherwise, maybe a few points of what you do that really matters. I gave a bunch of titles and roles and things, but who is Juliette, so folks know who they're hearing from today?
So that well, that is a good question. So I mean, I'm a mother of 3, which is obviously nice to remind people. So I'm just like you, or somewhat like you, but I think about safety and security as the CEO of a home as much as I do as someone who has run institutions, who advises institutions. Professionally, I like to say I've had one career in many jobs, and I essentially am in the risk reduction, disaster management space. It's taken a variety of different twists and turns. Some people's careers are like that. I've been in government, 3 major stints at the Department of Justice, state government as a Homeland Security advisor to a governor, and as assistant secretary at DHS. I am on the faculty at Harvard's Kennedy School, where I run the Homeland Security program. I do a lot of corporate work advising CEOs and boards and others about building for preparedness. And I'm also, as you said, an author and a CNN analyst and a columnist for The Atlantic and a contributor to WGBH, where I say I'm blessed to have these platforms to be able to try to communicate to people about the world that we're in, which we tend to mystify, glamorize, keep secret. And ultimately, this book, which has been in my head, I would say, for 10 to 15 years, is a way to make disaster management accessible, because it's essentially a lot of stories.
And hopefully we'll get a few of those stories.
Great.
Not many disasters taking place lately.
It's so I'll be totally honest. Well, I'm always honest, but it makes anyone who's in our space, who has platforms and stuff, it's hard because you don't want to take advantage of some of the horrors that are going on, but everything that happens is relevant. They didn't do this, they did this, this was good, this was bad. But that is the theme of the book. I mean, The Devil Never Sleeps is obviously about recurring disasters and how we are thinking about disaster management all wrong. And so the book is part opening the curtain for readers simply to see how the profession works, because I think that's important, and part history of what went right and wrong from centuries of past crises. So from the Trojan War to Surfside, I get all the way to Surfside, Florida. My goal was to reframe how we think about disasters and success. And so in an age when disasters, as you note, are not random or rare, simply put, we need to learn to fail safer. In other words, we have to not focus on the possibility or even what are the probabilities of reaching the boom, of the devil arriving, and begin to figure out what can we learn from good disaster management, right? Because we always focus on the bad. What are the lessons we can take from the stories that I tell that help us fail safer? So in other words, I'm assuming a certain level of harm, and I basically argue for a standard of less bad, that our investments in preparedness and response really have to be measured in sort of a less bad standard. And then I provide what those lessons are.
Yep. I love it. And here's a bit of OSINT for some folks listening.
Yeah.
You mentioned Surfside. I was actually considering some property down that way, right around the time that event occurred. And I won't say that it has stopped me from
Yeah.
pursuing it, but it certainly gave me pause. And I guess
Yeah.
what I want to get your perspective on, and I don't know if you cover this in the book or not, is just disasters shouldn't stop us from living or proceeding or
No, that's
progressing, right?
right. So and I think like COVID is a good example, or where we are in COVID right now and the debates that are going on about opening up. I don't talk about safe, as I said, safer. I don't talk about risk elimination. I talk about risk minimization. I don't talk about consequence elimination. I talk about consequence minimization. In other words, if we want to live in the society that we certainly want to live in, right? Think about just even the action of getting into an airplane, but nuclear facilities and oil and living in certain places, we can learn how to live and with the expectation that something bad will happen. I want to put one little caveat on this. There is a part in the book in which I do say it may be that in some places, let's say Surfside or Paradise, California, where there was a major fire that killed nearly 100 people, that there are places where we have to learn to retreat. That, in other words, because of the expectation that the fire will come again. But for the most part, we can learn to manage the consequences a lot better.
And so many questions and thoughts in my head, but let's go here. Does it have to be the right person to prepare for and manage the disaster that's
No,
pending?
can
anybody be a disaster?
And we already
recovery
are.
leader?
I mean, in some ways, the sell of this book was relatively easy. Like, to convince people, like, you're going to be in a crisis every day is relatively easy to do when it comes to after COVID. But this is not a COVID book. It's really important, even though I know what your focus is. And the last time I was on here, we talked specifically about cyber. I'm quite agnostic about what the cause of the harm is. Throughout the book, I simply say the boom. Right. And I'm agnostic. Is it a terror attack, a cyber attack, a slow roll pandemic, a hurricane, an earthquake, whatever it is. Right. And the problems, right, because there's so many problems, so many risks that you can focus on. The problems, I say, don't follow patterns, but the solutions actually do, if you're just willing to study disasters, right? It's a field of study, so that the causes may vary, but the consequences are often the same. So in our space, or in the cyberspace, one of the examples I use to describe sort of the faulty architecture that often happens in a lot of our industries is the bifurcation of cybersecurity from physical security. So the best example, of course, is Colonial Pipeline, where they had a rigorous, what do I say, sort of, information security. In other words, they were trying to protect themselves from breach. That doesn't happen. The ransomware attack against Colonial Pipeline here in the United States, which is, of course, impacted our energy distribution, was not very sophisticated. In fact, we have every reason to believe that the ransomware attackers were kind of surprised of how bad Colonial Pipeline had planned its what we call right of boom preparedness. And what had happened was, they're trying to protect their wires, whatever. Okay, let's assume that doesn't happen. It cannot be that your only plan is to turn off for a week. That's not a sophisticated response plan. And so part of what I talk about is you don't have to be a cyber expert. You don't have to be, basically this is simple unity of effort. Like, are you, what could go wrong? And then are you ready for the consequences of what can go wrong? And so what I try to do is relate stories from my own personal life, from my own personal experiences, but as well as, the big ones like Fukushima and relatively small ones, so that everyone can think about what it is that they can do to learn to fail safer on the home, individual, corporate, institutional, whatever it is. And so that's the goal, is to give people the tools for a less bad standard, right? Because I think one of the challenges, as I write in the book, one of the challenges is, of course, it can seem so overwhelming. And so that my book has been described as accessible, as user-friendly, as easy read. Those are all compliments, right? In other words, that's exactly what I wanted, because no one's going to read a book about incident command structure, right? Like, we're not going to do that. The other thing that's important for me in terms of the audience is for me to tell the stories of what went right in the Boston Marathon, even though that was a terror attack, what went right at a nuclear facility down the street from Fukushima. So that's the story I illuminate. Everyone remembers Fukushima and the radiation leak. No one remembers the good nuclear facility. Well, we can learn a lesson from that. What went right when the Ever Given closed the Suez Canal? How come we didn't see a major disruption? And I tell those stories so that people can see, oh yeah, there's a reason for the investment in preparedness and response planning.
And can you maybe pull the string on one of your own personal stories, maybe to kind of illustrate what you're talking about?
Yeah. So, I tell the story of the Haiti earthquake. So I'm in the Obama administration, a horrible, horrible earthquake. And so the thing that you're trying to respond to when something like that happens is what we call stupid deaths. Well, actually, the Haitians call them stupid deaths. The people aren't stupid who die. These are the deaths that occur not at the moment of, but because of the failure to prepare for the moment of. In other words, you can't get resources to people. And there's, a famous line in my field called 9 meals till anarchy, which is basically you have 3 days until people become very desperate. So one of the things I wanted to focus on is, okay, well, why did that response look like it is? People will remember, of course, it was horrible, whatever, but why did getting 10,000 Army military in first over, say, protecting the kids or whatever are the other 100 other needs, right? Or the orphans. And one of the reasons is if you can get water and food to people quickly, you are going to minimize what we call the stupid deaths. And those are hard calculations. But if we begin to talk about them, people then will begin to understand, okay, there's a reason why you're doing this and not that. On a more personal level, honestly, I have mother 3. COVID, and I was protecting. I was screaming from the hilltops in February of 2020, but what was about to happen. My first column for The Atlantic was titled "America, You Have No Idea What's About to Happen." Literally, that was its title. It was in early March, and then things break down. But I also, like any parent, began to see the consequences of a strategy of risk elimination, right? Once we had the vaccine, kids should be going back to school, right? In other words, because the consequences of them not being in school had not been calculated. into our original response. And so I became very, very vocal about, look, yeah, your kid's less safe by going to school. We get that. We get that. On the other hand, we can do lots to minimize their vulnerability. And I think that's important for people like me to say, because my kids were, the calculation for my kids was the same.
Yeah, and it's actually recorded earlier a conversation with the CISO of a large hospital system, and he was talking about the importance of a framework and a program that is developed and implemented in a way that's dynamic and can handle crisis and
Yeah.
disasters.
Yeah.
Not a set of technologies and
No.
tools and processes that are so defined and locked down that you're stuck scrambling every time.
Yeah.
And I know in some of the content here I was looking at to prepare this, you talk about offering up a new framework. So I don't know. Obviously, a framework like NIST is one
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
but I'm not talking about that. I'm thinking you're talking broader in terms of how to approach disasters and prepare for
Yeah.
that. Is that right?
Right. So I basically give 8. So basically the broad framework is this, and I make it simple for people. The world is divided into 2 times, right? So if boom is the devil, right? And I'm going to be agnostic. We call it left of boom and right of boom, or I call it left of boom, right of boom. There's only 2 types. One is, all the things you're going to try to do to mitigate the harm, or stop the harm. So all the technology that you're buying in cybersecurity, mitigation efforts with climate change, all that stuff. And then right of boom is all your response and resiliency and recovery apparatus. And so what I do is I focus on, okay, at that I have a recurring theme in the book, which is called "You Are Here," right? So in other words, you are here at the moment of the boom. What could you have done to protect what I call the high priority value of your organization? In other words, it doesn't have to be everything. It's just like the high priority things, right? The things that you want to need to protect. And let's take the surprise out of disaster management, right? Just assume it's going to happen so that we're not as focused on risk and risk calculation and could X happen, but maybe Y is more likely, and also focused on that consequence. So one key lesson of the 8, and buy the book and you'll learn all 8, but one major thing, well, the first chapter is called getting your head around it, which is simply stop focusing on different risks and stop focusing on different risks and start focusing on major consequence management. And if you focus on that, you're going to result in less harm. And so one of the key takeaways from looking at a gazillion disasters throughout is the need for immediate situational awareness in a disaster. I think lots of people are confused. It's hard to get reliable information in a disaster. And so what you can set up now are the capacities of reliable information that you would want when the bad thing happens. And it could be as simple as, where are my kids and where are they going if I can't contact them, to if you're the CEO of JetBlue, how come it takes you 7 hours to realize 21 of your planes are stuck at LaGuardia and aren't at the gate, right? Like what discrepancy is happening there? And so really focus on, what information am I getting so that it drives resources in the future.
And I love this because you talk about consequence
Yeah.
and not the event necessarily. And to me, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but to me, the consequence can be so multifaceted that even just visualizing or gaining an understanding of it could be difficult, let alone communicating around
Right.
all of it and rallying folks around a solution to minimize the consequence, right?
That's exactly right. And that's so I talk about, what are you communicating? And it's quite simple. There's entire lecture, entire courses, master's degrees in crisis communications. I'm going to make it make it very simple for you. Two things: numbers and hope. And what I mean by numbers is people actually do want facts during a crisis. And for all the talk of misinformation and all that craziness, I always have to remind my students and everyone, like, close to 80% of the US population, eligible US population, has one shot, and close to 74% have two. Like, yeah, for all the noise out there, those are pretty good numbers, right? So people want to know sort of, what are the facts, what's happening, and then so it's numbers and hope. And then they also want to know, what are you doing to make tomorrow better? Because people's tolerance for harm, people will be tolerant of harm if they know there's a pathway out of the harm, right? In other words, you're not ignoring it, as we saw in COVID. So one of the so basically, numbers and hope is what I really want people to focus on, in terms of what would you want to know what would you want to do at that moment of boom. So, like, when I say people are tolerant of risk, like, I do think that debate about COVID has gotten us so skewed about risk elimination. Like, there's no risk elimination. This thing is going to be here for a while, but there's lots of risk minimization, starting, of course, with the vaccine, but treatments and masking and all the stuff that we're always yelling about. We have 10 or 12 tools now to deal with COVID, when in March of 2020, we had none except for to stay inside. And I want people to understand, like, we're just making a calculation, right? I mean, in other words, like, this notion of safe is a sort of a ridiculous notion. And that's what I want to disabuse people of, and maybe they can see that through the history of disasters. Like, disasters are tragic and chaotic, but they are also oddly familiar. They do tend to follow the same demands. And it's those demands, from situational awareness to stopping the stupid deaths to testing your systems, as we know, certainly in the cyber world. All of those lessons are accessible and knowable now.
And I presume you talk a bit, well, in one of the write-ups, talks about perpetual catastrophe.
Yeah, I know.
And I can easily see a case where the numbers, like, put a knife in the hope.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, do you talk about how to reset hope?
Yeah.
And not burn out and things like that.
Yeah. So one of the stories that I tell, two of the main stories that I tell, and I'll tell them now so people can get a flavor of, like, oh, I get this, right? Like, these are stories I understand. So one is the Boston Marathon. So, we focus on a couple numbers, right? 2 brothers, right? And the failure of being able to capture or stop the terror attack. We focus on 3 who died at the finish line. So a tragedy, of course, right? At the moment of the bombing. The number I focus on in the book is 297. So 297 is the number of people who have what the medical profession would call traumatic injuries. And those ranged from, major wounds to a loss of a limb, a loss of a hand or a foot. 297 people had what was called traumatic injuries. They are all transported to hospitals in 3 states based on the planning for a traumatic event or some sort of catastrophic event at the finish line. If you made it to a hospital, you did not die. So 297 is also my number, right? In terms of thinking about measuring success. Not good. I don't live in the world of good. I live in the world of less bad, right? This is what it means to live on the right side of the boom. Am I hopeful that the next time we'll stop the terrorists? Yes. Do I want to build for a world that's more resilient and less ideologically extreme? Certainly. But as I keep saying, like, we are here, like, it's now. That's the devil never sleeps. The other story I tell is the one about the other facility at Fukushima, March 11th, major earthquake leading to a tsunami. We focus on Fukushima, the nuclear facility that had radiation leak causing death, and of course evacuation, and an uninhabitable area right now. Still in Japan. The story we don't tell is of the facility down the street. Literally no lie. It was closer to, it's called Onagawa. It was actually closer to the epicenter, had more damage, got lots of water. It did not have a radiation leak. So when I talk about standards of success, right, the difference between a crisis and a catastrophe, they both faced a crisis. But I look at the other facility and say, okay, wait a second. Like, you have all these beliefs about nuclear safety. Let me tell you about the nuclear facility that most people have never even heard of before, that actually failed safer. And what did they do? They had lots of training. They had a system that allowed the people on the ground to make decisions. So at Fukushima, they always had to call to Tokyo. So if you have to call to Tokyo in the middle of a crisis, they knew how to protect the radiation areas so that when the water came rushing in, there would be no radioactive material leak. And so I take these two, this story that we think we know of Fukushima and say that's too simple, right? Because I've got another nuclear facility down the street. So those are the kinds of stories that I tell about. Okay, what are the stories I'm not telling about, or that we're not hearing about, these disasters that can help us think about a world in which there's too many disasters? I get that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, I love those examples. And
Thank you.
I'm wondering when you, I don't know if it's feedback you've received from those who read the book,
Yeah.
or when you're engaging in consulting with organizations or speaking at events, do you find that people think they have a good crisis response plan? And what are they taking away from reading the book and engaging with you to say, we need to start over, or
No,
here's the
and
area we need to
yeah.
focus on, or what are you hearing?
So I asked 3 questions at the end of the book, sort of, okay, where do I begin if it never ends, right? Because there could be, paralyzing aspect to it. So there's 3 questions I ask the reader to ask themselves. The first is, where am I? And I don't mean that existentially or like metaphysically. I mean, like, in other words, do you have your head around the potential for a catastrophe, or and then are you accessible, to lead, whether it's in your home or your CEO or institution leader, when that event happens. So a huge part of this is just accepting the right side of the boom, accepting that it will be your responsibility to fail safer. And that's success, right? Because in disasters, we tend to think of, or in our narratives, we think of success as no disaster and failure as disaster, right? So if you can stay on the left side of the boom, that's success. If you end up in the right side of the boom, that's failure. And that's that's so simplistic. It's so binary. And so why you fail safer. So that's the first question, is where are you? The second is, how are you built? So this goes mostly to institutional leaders, but also can apply to parents. Like when I think about our preparedness, if you want to call that, planning always revolved around me for obvious reasons. I'm the one who thinks about this professionally, but I'm also the one who's on the road. And so that's not a very good, so, so we thought about, okay, how are we built as a family? Like, is this the right way to do it? And as the kids get older, and they're in college, what would happen if X, Y, or Z happened? And so one of the things that we're seeing, and this is going to be very familiar to a lot of your listeners, is the division between the chief security officer, the chief information security officer, and the rise of the chief medical officer, the chief public health officer. So you have these 3 different chiefs, right? Well, those are all risk focused, but when the bad thing happens, your consequences are generally going to be the same. So I'm promoting with my clients or board speeches I give what I'd call the chief preparedness officer. Get out of, you can have a director of information security. You can have an operations for physical, what we call guns, guards, and gates, the physical stuff. But you really want someone who's thinking strategically, say, about what will happen to the institution. This is what Colonial Pipeline lacked. Think also about Sony, a major hack in which, relatively easy hack. Well, the consequences are felt physically in every movie theater that was planning on holding this movie because of the threats that were coming from North Korea. So that's one of my things. And then the third question is, where's your money? I can't, tell people how much to spend on X, Y, and Z. I just ask people, if you have 100 pennies, how much is being spent on preparedness generally, right? So if it's 0, you're in trouble. If it's 2, you're probably still in trouble. If it's 20, that might be good, or that. And then how much of that number, how much of that 20 cents is being spent on preparedness, on consequence management? So I think cybersecurity is a really good example of where, if I said, okay, here's $1, how much is being spent on left of boom prevention versus right of boom? I think the industry is like at 80-20. I mean, the number of companies that I go into that, are so focused on breach and stopping the breach and, all the defense and everything. And then when it happens, it's not entirely clear who's doing what, right? I mean, think about, and so I would change that a lot in the cyberspace. I would change that distribution.
It's interesting you went there, and I'm gonna go right back there in a second. But I love the chief preparedness officer.
Yeah. I think absolutely
super cool.
Yeah,
super cool. Now, what I want to do and close with, and forgive me if this is a little complicated, but we're talking about boom, an event. I'm actually feeling the boom as I'm saying that, right? There's something big that happens. And you said the word binary, so it's one side or the other.
Yeah.
My question to you is, and I'm gonna leverage the title of the book: does the boom always represent itself or present itself as a devil? And the second part of my question is, does it always have to feel like a boom, or can it be a slow burn?
It can be a slow burn. And that's the pandemic. That can be a climate disaster. What separates a crisis, and I'm clear to make a distinction, because I actually just gave a talk at the Kennedy School and got into a healthy debate with someone, which is, okay, so crisis is defined as something that disrupts the core value of the institution, right? That is debilitating to that. So it's not your average emergency. It's not, the fire alarm going off or whatever. It is something core. It is that in which your ability to respond is limited in time. So this is a little bit controversial, because it means that I do see a distinction between the tornado or the hurricane coming through and climate change generally. And the reason why is because, to the people impacted, yes, it's great to have big debates about climate change, but when the tornado is coming through, you just want to fail safer, right? And so I really do focus on, at least in the literature, how we define it is that in thinking about it, presents a restricted amount of time in which a response can be made. So you really are talking in limited time. And I do that to separate it from, honestly, just basically public policy challenges, right? So climate change, border, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna poke a little more, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
I'm thinking misinformation in social media platforms.
Yeah.
Right, where there may be bad stuff happening, but not at a grand scale yet. And another scenario might be, I don't know, a train station bombed versus complete cities bombed. When does it turn into a crisis?
Right. So, it is. So one is, to the person experiencing it, everything will see, right? Whether it's, the small bomb doesn't matter to the person who's experiencing. And so I'm pretty clear in terms of, this is a disruption to a high value priority of the organization, right? So if you thought this sounds horrible, but in a nation that is suffering from, or let me put it different, something that is of low consequence is not a crisis, right? So I use the example of selfie stick deaths, right? I mean, we have a couple dozen people a year die in the United States from selfie stick deaths. We're not going to base our entire crisis management system around them, right? I mean, those are low probability events. And so I really focus on the consequence side, and it's a numbers game. I don't mean to suggest this number dead and that is okay and that's not, but COVID's a perfect example. COVID was never going to have no fatalities, right? So the difference I'm looking at is, 300,000 versus 1 million, right? Why did 300,000 people in the United States die since the vaccine was accessible, right? Like that's what I'm looking at in terms of it. In terms of like, does the boom always have to be bad? There's a lot of opportunity in crisis. Crisis generally viewed as a disruption, and disaster is defined as a misalignment of the stars, dis meaning bad and aster meaning alignment, or the stars, so misalignment of the stars. But there are opportunities out of disasters, and they don't fit easily into the disaster management framework. But lots of people in disaster management are very much focused on that. For example, can we build a better disaster relief system that provides money to people so that they don't build exactly the same, right? Think of these houses that are going down in the Outer Banks in North Carolina. Why are we paying people to live like that? Let's pay them to move back 100 feet.
Yeah. Excellent point.
Well,
I don't know if I'd be buying there now, but Juliette, I mean, you've made me think a ton, which is the whole point of what we do here. And I presume it's the whole point of your book. And beyond that, for your book, though, is people to take action.
Yes,
and,
I hope so.
And I'm thrilled to have you on. I want to congratulate you again on number 6. It sounds like it's getting well received by those reading it, business leaders, folks in government, and beyond that. And of course, for those listening to this, we'll put a link in the show notes so you can all grab a copy of the book and anything else that Juliette thinks would be helpful for folks to tap into as they consider disaster management, crisis management.
Yeah.
So Juliette, thank you so much for being part of a new Audio Signals here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it a lot.
Blue Lava is the first business platform for CISOs to manage their security program. Blue Lava guides security leaders to effectively measure, optimize, and communicate their security program with confidence and ease in one platform. Learn more at bluelava.net.
Nintex is the global standard for business process management and automation. The Nintex platform helps their clients accelerate progress on their digital transformation journeys by quickly and easily managing, automating, and optimizing business processes. Learn more at nintex.com.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Audio Signals. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society, and some even beyond that.